Well, thank you all for coming. Thank you all for coming this afternoon. Of all the places you could be, this is a great place to be. Thank you to all of those who arrived early. They were scattered all over, and I asked them to come down front, and they did. So they're practicing not being Methodist for a little while. We have a mixture of people from 3 different services. So if you will look around, see who's sitting in your seat. What I want you to do, before you leave today, introduce yourself to that person. And tell them that they have great taste in the seat selection. I do have a couple of handouts. Doug and Debbie, would you mind helping me out with that? These were produced by our conference. They came out Friday. One was going to be a bulletin insert, but we didn't get it until 2 o'clock on Friday afternoon. So it was beyond what we would normally have done, because it was done, folded and everything on Thursday. So they'll be passing those out to you. Yes, if your husband and wife, if you don't mind, or family, if you just take one, so make sure we have enough for everybody. The one that Doug is passing out currently is the bulletin insert, just a simple summary of things. The one that Debbie's passing out, and you will get both of those, so we're going to switch. That is a fact sheet, FAQ fact sheet. I didn't pass them out earlier just to make sure everybody gets one. But we didn't have them out, so I told them. People were coming in 4 or 5 different doors. If you need them, we'll come back if we need some more. Okay, you want to start? Well, you want to start on this side of it?
Yeah.
Okay. Doug will come back around to the other side.
Yeah. I'll get some. I'll get it.
Typical Methodist fashion. You got some organization and chaos all working together. While you're still receiving your handouts, let me say that today we don't take any votes. Okay, we're not voting on anything to alleviate anybody's concerns. Likewise, we're not really here to argue the merits of one position or another. This is a time for information and trying to understand the information and what that means for not only the Methodist Church, but for us as a local congregation as well as we move forward. Let's have a prayer. Our gracious Lord, we thank you for the opportunity to be here today. Help us to have, indeed, open hearts, open minds, open spirits to you. Help us to try to listen, to understand, process that, so that we can continue to be your people in your church, doing your ministry. And this we ask in the name of Jesus our Lord. Amen. Okay, let's begin. We're going to talk a little bit about some background stuff. I don't want to bore you with some of that, but just so you understand how the Methodist Church works and how all this kind of thing happened, how it was decided. We're going to start, though, with our own local church, with our vision, our purpose, and our values. Our vision: a passionate community that grows the faith of individuals, worships with purpose, loves extravagantly. Our purpose: loving God, loving others. Values: acceptance, authenticity, excellence, relevance, being Trinity-centered. Nothing changes on that. Okay? This is still who we are. This is what we're about. We will continue to be about that. The larger church, the United Methodist Church, has a theme, if you will, as well. Their purpose described is making disciples of Jesus Christ for the transformation of the world. No decision that we made the other day changes that either. Still the purpose. Now let's talk a little bit about the structure of the Methodist Church. Okay? The Methodist Church is kind of structured in some way similar to the U.S. government. It has three branches, if you will. Okay? There's a legislative group, that's the General Conference. Executive branch, which is in essence the Council of Bishops. And the judicial branch, which is the Judicial Council. They have functions, as is described by what the branch is. Let me tell you this, the General Conference is a conference of delegates from around the world. It's representative of the entire United Methodist Church. And there are Methodists not only in the United States, but Europe, Asia, Africa. The General Conference meets every 4 years. They are the group that officially speaks for the United Methodist Church. The rest of us, unless we are quoting something from the discipline, we're just giving our opinions or our understandings. The General Conference makes those decisions for all of us. They meet every 4 years unless there is a reason to call a special conference, which this one was. The one that just completed this week was a special call conference. We're 3 years into the 4-year period now. So we will have another general conference, a regularly scheduled one, next year in 2020. When we have a conference, there's always an equal number of lay people and clergy. Okay? Well, in the Methodist Church, you find that all up and down in the structure. Always an equal number. So it's not clergy-driven. It is a balance of clergy and laity. This is a group, as I mentioned, they're responsible for the overall scope and rules, if you will, by which United Methodists are expected to live by. The bishops have kind of a shepherding ministry, if you will. The active bishops oversee particular areas. Florida is one of those. It covers most of the state of Florida. We have a bishop there. So there are multiple places around the United States as well as overseas. The Council of Bishops gets together and has that shepherding ministry to give guidance and so forth. At a general conference, the bishops do not vote. They oversee, they moderate the sessions, and so forth, but they do not vote. The judiciary is just what it says. It rules on the constitutionality. The United Methodist Church has a constitution, and they rule on the constitutionality of any actions that are taken. Now, there's some good things and there's some bad things about our structure. When we have a church as large as ours, although we have lost a number of members over the last several years, there's still some 12 million members worldwide. And you have this diverse group of people. You have to have some way of getting people together and getting things done. But this is strictly my opinion, okay? But when you have a system that's set up much like the federal government, you get some of the same kinds of results. Okay? It puts us always in a position where there's votes up and down. And often things like what we just decided this week is a simple majority vote. It doesn't need a supermajority or anything like that. So we always have that kind of dynamic happening. And unfortunately, no matter what the issues are, because of that, we have winners and losers in issues, which is very difficult when you're talking about the church. Anyway. So that's part of the background there. Now, I'll tell you a little bit more about another part of the structure. We can go on to that next one. Of course, there are lots of local churches. We're one of them in the state of Florida. I think there are currently just under 700 local churches. We're gathered together in districts. Okay, we are now part of the East Central District. There are 8 districts in the state of Florida, so we're not quite this whole state, but you'll see that. So there are several different districts, there's 8 of them, that are grouped together in a conference, an annual conference. So that's the beginning of that structure. In the United States, we have these annual conferences. Outside of the United States, we have what they call central conferences. Same thing, but they cover larger areas because of the population's locations. And together, we make up the United Methodist Church. So you understand that basic structure. Okay. Now, we'll talk a little bit about what the Judicial Commission Committee does. They rule on, as I said, the constitutionality of what happens. Not only in general conference, but actions that bishops may take or annual conferences may take. And they say, does it fit within our Constitution? The United Methodist Constitution, not the United States, but United Methodist Constitution. Everything that's taking place at a general conference, anything decided, it always gets reviewed. Okay, there's never a question about that. Of course, this particular time, it was specifically reviewed, sent for review as soon as possible. Whatever is decided at any general conference doesn't go into effect until the earliest of January of the following year. So you could have a general conference in February or July. It's always at minimum January of the next year. Gives everyone time to process it, understand it. Of course, all of that has to be translated into several languages so that people can all have the same accurate information. Each general conference speaks for itself. And so when the conference meets again in 2020, it's going to be a slightly different, or actually a different group of people. And they, in turn, they want to take up the issue once again, come to a different conclusion. So every general conference is a group unto itself. Does that make sense? Okay. Okay, I think we're ready for this. Okay. So these were the key issues that were on the table for this call session of the General Conference. Clergy ordination. Will people from the LGBTQ community be included for ordination, or will they not? The same gender unions or marriages, will our clergy be allowed to perform those? And will those be allowed to take place in our facilities or our properties? Those were the 3 main things. There were a couple of other things tossed in there as well. Some points of clarification on a few things. Something having to do with the pensions. If clergy choose to exit the system, how is that going to be secured and so forth. I won't get into those details unless you feel like you really want to know some of those things. Now, there were 3 plans. Back in 2016, the General Conference there said we need a commission, we need a group to study this issue and bring us back something we can deal with to make decisions on. So they had a 32-member commission made up of people from all across the globe, and they worked on that for a couple of years. Came up with 3 plans. One they called a traditional plan, the other one church plan, and the other the connectional conference plan. Very simply, to describe those and just keep it very brief, traditional plan was basically keeping the language that we have currently, and then adding some ability to enforce that, that isn't there now or wasn't being abided by, that people chose to break those particular rules. The one church plan kept us in our annual conferences. We have local church district annual conference. In our annual conferences, but allowed 3 different expressions. So people could have full inclusion with everything. So that would mean people in the LGBTQ community would not only welcome the worship, but fully ordained and the marriages would take place in our facilities by our clergy. The traditional plan would hold to our language and everything it is now. And then there was a kind of a combination of those two, kind of halfway in between. But it created a space for everyone who would want to choose one or the other, but we would remain in one conference. The conference connection plan was a little different in that it took that to a higher level. Annual conferences wouldn't be deciding anything. Churches would simply affiliate with the groups they felt called to affiliate with. So if you're a traditional group, you affiliate with traditional people, and it may cross state lines or conference boundaries as well. That would have required a lot of adjustments and changes to accomplish it. So that's, in brief, what the three plans were. Now, what was decided at the General Conference was to maintain the language we currently have, which was, in essence, the traditional plan, which says that we do not ordain, so we talked about the three things there, we do not ordain people who are identifying themselves as part of the LGBTQ community. We will not do the unions within our facilities or properties, nor will we allow our clergy to do that. Let's take a step back for a moment. We'll mention a couple of very important things, because these are really the three things that are on the table. But at the same time, we have other statements and positions that we believe all people are of sacred worth. Everyone is created in the image of God. They have sacred worth because of that. Everyone should be welcomed, loved, and invited into our congregations. There were no limits put on anyone for participation in the church, being part of the life of the church, being baptized, becoming full members in the church, receiving sacraments in the church. There were no limitations. The only limitations came with ordination and marriages. Everything else was, everyone's completely included. We don't ask the question, we ask people about membership. We don't ask what their orientation is or their position on different things. And that is true across the board. And we also have positions in the Methodist Church. We have very clearly said we don't believe there should be any discrimination against people based upon their sexual orientation when we're talking about in the world. There shouldn't be any reason for any of that. On an individual level, from person to person, nor in a larger corporate kind of setting. So we affirm all of that. So we're not talking about whether or not someone is welcomed into the congregation or has a place within the congregation. It's a limitation of those three items. Now, if you were to look at the spectrum, if you will, you see that diagram on the bottom. To the left, if you were to diagram it for positions in churches, full exclusion would be to your left. That would mean people are not welcome. Anyone from the LGBTQ community, unless they disavow that, wouldn't really be welcome in the life of the church. They couldn't be members, they couldn't receive sacraments, they couldn't walk in their discipleship, couldn't do any of that. That would be full exclusion. The middle position is what I would describe as our current position. Inclusion within the body, but some limitations when it comes to ordination. Full inclusion says that there are no restrictions. Not only welcome and participate in the body of the church, but can also become ordained ministers. And the Methodist Church has traditionally been in the middle. We've been in that kind of position for over 40 years. And the decision this week was, in essence, to reaffirm that basic position. Though there were some things added to it, and we'll get to that in just a moment. So that's the basics of where things were, where things before we flip over Scott, stay on that one for just a moment. Trying to find my other note here. I know I'm forgetting something. I apologize. Okay. Well, we'll go ahead and move on to the next one. Part of the question is, what's a loving response to people in the LGBTQ community? We do have fundamental differences within the Methodist Church, and actually within the body of Christ, as to the interpretation of Scripture. And it's not only on these issues, but a number of different ones. But on this issue, and there are legitimate understandings, differences, and how you process all of that, where people come to different conclusions as to whether people should be included fully or not, limitations with that. And the interpretations are legitimate. To oversimplify it, if you will, one group would say, well, we have these overarching principles that Jesus laid out for us. Love everyone. He didn't make any exceptions. And so that would then dictate how we deal with everyone. Others would say, well, we have those principles, but it doesn't necessarily negate the details of what we're looking at. And so you can see that legitimately, you come from different locations, a different understanding, and you have a different interpretation of what that means. That leads to a different understanding of what is a loving response. Some would say the loving response is you just love people. Take them in. Don't worry about it. Let God figure all of that out. If they have a calling, if they have evidence of that calling, then so be it. Others would say, well, the conclusion is that we love everyone. A certain kind of behavior is not acceptable. And the loving response is to say that that's what it is. To not let someone stay in that position. So you have two different ideas, two different conclusions. Now, you probably already read all this stuff, and then to be able to know that. When it came right down to the voting of it, it was a 53 point something to 46 point something. So 53-47% as far as passing that traditional plan or reaffirming it. That's a pretty close. You know, you can say, well, Bill, that's six percentage points. Yeah, it's 3 of 1 dead even. So clearly, within the Methodist Church, we are divided on the issue. And unfortunately, sometimes when you get into those positions, and like a general conference where you're having speeches for and against and you're voting and so forth, people begin to point fingers and they begin to accuse one another of different things. And it becomes kind of political. And it's sad, but that's unfortunately the way the system works accordingly. It'd be much better if we could find a way where it wasn't so political. If you have ideas, let me know. So even we can't even agree necessarily on what the loving response is. So we'll have to look at all this as we move forward. Now, right, back to the next one. Is that coming up? Okay. What's ahead? There are rulings that need to take place on the constitutionality of all of these things. Some portions of the traditional plan had previously been ruled that they would not be constitutional, but the amendments they tried to attach to it to correct that were not approved. So there may be some portions of it that are approved and other portions that are not. So it's hard to say. A good deal of it was deemed constitutional in earlier rulings. And obviously the position that we currently hold is made constitutional. Part of that is an expansion of that. Okay, so someone asked me earlier this week, if any portion of that's deemed unconstitutional, does that throw everything out? The answer is no. Each petition is considered separately. Each portion of it is considered separately. It may have an effect on whether or not you can follow it, but it doesn't necessarily rule out all of it if any portion of it is deemed unconstitutional. What are the options for individuals? Well, as it is now, within the Methodist Church, this is one of the beauties, for me at least, in the Methodist Church is. The Methodist Church, we take a position on something. But has anyone ever asked you to sign on the dotted line that you accept this or you accept that? No, because that's not who we are. This is who we are. But as individuals, you can disagree with any of those things. You can disagree with all of them if you want to. You're not required to say, I believe in everything that they've made a position on 100%. Because I probably wouldn't even be. I promise you I would be if I had to say 100% on every single thing. And this is one of those issues. It's an important issue. And some of us are going to have differing opinions on this issue. But if it were capital punishment, we would have differences. If the issue was abortion, we would have differences. If it were gambling, we're going to have differences. Perhaps the only one we may not at the moment have any differences on would be human trafficking. Though, depending upon how you want to frame that and enforce that, we may. So we have to be careful when we're dealing with one another, particularly in the local church, that we're not pigeonholing one another, whether we agree or we disagree. Because I've had conversations with many of you individually, we may agree on one position and disagree on the other. That's the way it always is. So as individuals, what are your options? You have every option available to you that you want, as you always do. You can agree, you can disagree, you can stay, you can leave, you can, petition the conference and contact the representatives and say, you need to look at this. I don't think it's right. You need to try to elect people to this next general conference that can change that. Or, I think you were right. I think you need to elect people to affirm that at the next one. You have those as options. You can participate in the system. Let me say one other item there, because I forgot to say it earlier. I did tell you that there's always an equal representation in the Methodist Church. I didn't tell you how we got there. Remember the diagram of the local church and the districts and conference and so forth? At the local church level, there is a clergy person and a lay person who go to annual conference. If you have more than one clergy person, you have more than one lay person. And those people automatically vote. You all, for example, in this church, your representatives at the church council and the church conference that we have each year, that no one really wants to go to. But it's important because we elect officers. We elect our representatives there. We have someone elected to serve as our annual conference delegate. So I and that person represent you as we go there. We are not obligated to take a poll and ask about this and about that and make sure that we vote according to that. But we are charged with, just like our government officials, doing what we believe is the right thing in God's eyes. But we have us as representatives. And in our Florida areas, everything from basically the Apalachicola River east all the way down to Key West. Huge area. 700 churches, 1,000 clergy within that. Big. So we have representatives from every clergy person, every lay person. There's over 2,000, I think over 2,200 representatives at our previous annual conference. That's a lot of people. But that group elects representatives to the general conference. And it's based upon the proportion of our conference membership to the overall United Methodist Church. Okay, does that make sense? So we are apportioned a certain number of delegates. For 2016, we were apportioned 18. Okay, so 18 people from Florida, 9 clergy, 9 lay people, were representing us at the general conference. That changes based upon demographics as churches lower in number and raising numbers in other places. So that helps you understand how we get there. So our delegates, again, and the 18, we were one of the larger delegations from Florida. We were one of the larger delegations. Not the largest, but one of the larger ones. certainly in the top 5 or 6, I believe. Okay, options for churches. Within the decisions that were made the other day, they did pass a form of whatever we would simply call an exit strategy, an exit plan. They call it different things, disaffiliation, disengagement, whatever. It's the same thing. But they did pass something that would allow churches to exit from the United Methodist Church. There are a lot of constitutionality questions caught up in all that. That's one of the things that the next Judicial Council will closely look at, is all of that. They will be meeting at the end of April. I believe it's the 22nd through the 25th or something like that. But that last week of April is when they will take on all of this stuff. And let me say as well, the people on the Judicial Council, they're people like you. There's no one that's there that's a paid person. They have some paid staff to help them with things, but they're all volunteer people, just like you. Most of them have some background in law of some sort, so they can comprehend the Constitution and all the questions that go along with that. But they're folks just like you. But there was a plan passed. The question would be constitutional. Part of what it said was that the church could exit with its property and assets if 2/3 of the members voted to do so. There's also some issue there about the pension liability that would have to be paid in a year's worth of apportionments, what we would normally pay to participate and help the larger mission of the Methodist Church. Now with that, I'm going to back up for just a second. It's surprising to many people, but in the United Methodist Church, a local congregation doesn't actually own its property solely to itself. It actually is a clause in our discipline that says we hold it in trust for our annual conference. So technically, we need to get permission from our district superintendent, and then sometimes even as far as our annual conference to buy, sell property, and so forth. We can't just do whatever we want, whenever we want, on our own at a local church level. Because we are responsible for it, but we don't have sole ownership of it. And so that's why there's this question, well, can't we just say we don't want to be part of you anymore? Not exactly. But we're trying to figure out how that may become possible. There's a process now, but it's a very long and cumbersome kind of process where a church can exit. And you've probably heard about some of those in the last couple of years as churches chose to exit the United Methodist Church even before this general conference. So they were working on a plan where that would be possible if people, churches felt like they couldn't live within whatever decision was made. So it might be possible, but there's still a lot of work yet to go. Okay? So what should we do? For me, it's pretty simple. You recognize that from where we began? This is still who we are. Okay? We have some differences about things. We're still working through those things. We're trying to figure out what all that means. But this is who we are. This is what we're supposed to be about. This is what we're supposed to be doing. We're still supposed to be a passionate community that grows people in their faith, that worships with purpose and loves extravagantly. We're still people who are supposed to be loving God and loving others. And we have those same values. Nothing changed about that. That's still who we are. And that's what we need to be about as well. Is there one more?
Nope, that's it.
That was the last one. There is another, as I mentioned earlier, there's a lot to work through. So much is up in the air as to what may be constitutional, what may not be. We won't even know that until at least the end of April. So there's a lot of patience that's going to be needed as we work through that. And what does that then mean for us as we move forward? And as I also mentioned, that 2020 is another general conference. And I assure you that the issues will come up again. We have, as the Methodist Church, struggled with this issue since 1972. That basic position we've had the same basic position since then. There have been some refinements, some clarifications, and so forth. We've dealt with it every 4 years since then. It's not something that simply is settled and goes away. As you can tell, with the 53-47 vote, there's not a clear majority one way or another. So that's part of the question is, what now? How do we navigate all of this now? And no one can really say that for certain. So I say, for us, let's keep doing what we're supposed to be doing, what we have been doing, and we'll try to help figure that process out along the way. We don't ask anybody when they walk in the doors what their sexual orientation is. We had communion today. That certainly was not a question that we asked. Okay? We asked everyone to prepare themselves. They need to determine, because we have an open table. We have an open congregation as well. And I hope I've never heard of anyone here feeling as though they were discriminated because of their orientation or otherwise. And I can tell you as a pastor, every church I've been in, there have been homosexual people in the LGBTQ community as part of the congregation, including couples. And that, for me, goes back 30 years. It's never been an issue as far as living and discipleship within the community. I can tell you this as well as a pastor. There's been a lot of grief, if you will, over the issue, because I know how much it pains some people and how heartbreaking all of that is. As a pastor, that's hard. Paul says we're one body, and when one part can rejoice, we can all rejoice. But when one hurts, we should all feel that hurt. So we should be empathetic and understanding. Whether we agree or disagree is beside that point. We still need to be understanding that there are people who hurt because of this. So I want to give you some opportunity for questions. I rattled on a little longer than I thought. But that gives us kind of a background. But I know you have lots of questions. I'll do my best to answer whatever they may be. And since I don't have a mic to pass around, what I'll do is attempt to restate the question and then answer.
I just want to know, are the percentages, the 47 and 53, getting closer together year after year, or staying about the
The
same?
question is, those percentages, are they, the 53-47, are they getting closer together, or are they staying about the same? They're roughly the same as they were in 2016, but the percentages have gotten much closer over the last 20 years. There was a time when it was more like a 70-30, and it's narrowed significantly in the last 20 years.
You may not want to take this upon right now. Question, when you said earlier about clergy, gay clergy choosing to leave, it doesn't sound like they actually have a choice because of the punishment. Can you tell us a little bit more about that and how we're going to take care of those people?
Okay, the question is, with gay clergy as they stand, they don't have the option to stay within the system. Okay? And how do we help care for those people if they're forced to leave? I'll say it is with gay clergy, but also not just them. Because there are many who feel that this is a real social justice issue, and they plan to stand there with their brothers and sisters. And so they may leave as well, even though they do not identify with that community themselves. That's part of the question that we're trying to work our way through. When we're talking about clergy in particular, that was part of what they dealt with the pension. And the pension, what they decided, and like I said, this is still things that have to be verified with our Constitution and all of that. But basically what they were trying to do was protect that. So if someone leaves, what they have put in there is safeguarded for them. There was some question about whether or not they would be able to participate, even though they were part of a different organization. We're not set up for that, but that's part of what they were trying to figure out and decide. So that still may come of 2020. But yes, there was a protection in that regard as far as retention of people would go. So people wouldn't just be pushed out in the cold, so to speak. There's some concern for that.
Gary, have the delegates for 2020 been named yet?
No. At annual conference this year, which takes place the first part of June, we will elect delegates to General Conference 2020. Some of those are often people who've been there more, once before. But there's always new people in that as well.
And then a follow-up to that, the trend is that the membership of the church is growing larger outside the United States than in the United States, correct?
Yes, what the statement was that the trend is outside of the United States, the Methodist Church is growing, and inside the United States, it's declining overall. Not individual churches, but overall. And that means as well, and this, if some of you saw how many of you may have seen the webinar on Friday with Bishop Carter and Alex Shanks? Okay, Molly. One of the things that Alex Shanks, and Alex is the assistant to the bishop, he did a lot of background work at Lakewood, through the last 3-4 years now. So he's very familiar with the issues. He mentioned that on that webinar that because of the growth of the churches outside, and particularly in Africa, our delegation from Florida will actually decrease from 18 to 16 people for 2020. And that delegation will increase. So it's always in a state of flux. And in any given conference year, people of different positions, they come and go. So you never really know for sure what that group's going to look like. Other questions?
About allowing them to teach Sunday school?
The question is, can people in the LGBT community teach in our Sunday schools? The answer is yes. Yes. They're fully included. Now, what is asked always is that when they're talking about these subjects, to make sure that the church's position is stated clearly, then you can have discussion and debate. But most of the time, someone can teach on various subjects and that not be an issue. That's not the one thing that defines someone completely. But yes, they are people. If you're a part of the fellowship, you're part of the fellowship. And it's been that way from the inception of the United Methodist Church in 1968.
Why, if there are rules, and we've had these same rules for a long time, does this even take place? Because how can you be elected or appointed to be a bishop or a pastor when you know it's against the rules? So, I mean, what is the point in why are they forcing this without any changes in the rules?
Well, they do have, I'll restate the question. The question is, if people enter into the system where we know the rules, why is it people break the rules and there's lack of accountability to break it? Is that fair enough to say? Okay. Well, the question is, yes, some people enter that and believing fully that they will be able to abide by those. And discover somewhere along the way that they can't. And it may be someone who's not part of identifying with the LGBTQ community, but for lack of a better word, is an ally of that community who says, this is not just, this is not right, and I'll fight for them on this. And so they would be willing to break the rules to help make the point and help bring it to a point where we really have to deal with it in a different way and see if it can be changed. That's where they would be coming from. Part of the process, if you will, is that part of what was passed by Tuesday was our refinement of how those things get enforced. And that's part of what's questioned under the constitutionality of it. Can it be enforced in the way they were talking about? In essence, they kind of stiffened it up. They removed some of the, for lack of a better term, loopholes where things cases could be simply dismissed without necessarily saying why. So you had a problem in the system where things were not being done the same in all places. So there was an inequity, if you will, across the system. And part of the legislation was an attempt to cut through all of that. And the penalties, if you will, were very stiff for that. Someone, for instance, a clergy person, if I'm reading it correctly, I don't know if it'll hold up, but if they did a same-gender marriage, and someone brought charges against them for doing so, were found guilty of that in a church trial, then they would be suspended for a year without pay. A second violation would be the surrender of their orders. They would no longer be a United Methodist clergy person. So it's much stiffer than it was before. And that's part of the question of, is that constitutional? And trying to figure that out.
What happened in 2016 that brought this to the attention of the conference, and they felt like they had to re-examine our faith, our way of worship?
Okay, the question is, what happened in 2016 that caused this process to happen? What happened was, we were dealing with this issue again. They, for lack of a better term, they took kind of a straw poll to kind of get a feel for where everybody was. And it was almost the same percentages as we had the other day. So they knew, well, we're a very divided church, almost 50-50. Perhaps we need to look at how we're doing this, potentially come up with a different way. So there isn't simply a winner and a loser, but the whole thing. So they said, well, let's appoint a commission to look at it, come back to us with possibilities. And they didn't limit the possibilities per se. And that's what the commission did. And then, of course, it comes back. And they had a special whole conference, so they wouldn't have to worry about dealing with a whole bunch of other business. Normally, a general conference lasts in the neighborhood of 7 days, roughly. Sometimes it's a little more, sometimes it's up to 10 days. And they're dealing with all kinds of issues. This was 4 days for one issue. So they wanted to focus on that.
Well, I thought one of the reasons was that there was a bishop that was openly gay, lesbian, a bishop that married a woman, and yet didn't report it. And that was one of the reasons why this came up also, because the other bishops allowed that to occur.
Her election as bishop happened after the conference, actually. His question was, he thought part of it was, there was a woman who was married to another woman, didn't necessarily make that public knowledge to the whole council of bishops and so forth, and that was one of those issues. That was one, but actually that came up kind of afterward, but there were a whole bunch of different ones. There was one bishop who went to a different bishop's jurisdiction, did the same gender union, even though that bishop asked not to have that done. So there's all those kinds of conflicts that were going on. So there were lots of different conflicts going on, as well as that basic vote that said, we're kind of split down the middle.
From what I've read, it sounds like a lot of U.S. churches do not agree with this decision. Do you see a lot of U.S. churches trying to exit?
Question. Sorry. The question was, from what she can see, and what she's read, a lot of the U.S. churches do not agree with the decision. And do I think a lot of U.S. churches will exit? From what I've heard, and I don't know that they did a statistical analysis on anything yet, because the delegates, when they vote electronically on devices. Their votes are not to be identified with them, though they do statistical analysis on the votes. So they know that, person device number 1 is a 50-year-old male from such and such kind of thing. They don't know specifically, it's kind of general ideas. So and what I've heard, and I don't know whether that's real or anecdotal, was that somewhere around 60% of U.S. churches favored that one church plan that created a space for different reflections on this issue, different positions on this issue, that at the annual conference level still kept us as one. that we could identify ourselves in a particular way. Clergy can do that, as well as churches. We can identify. But yeah, that was the statistic I heard tossed out there. Do I see? I don't know that anybody's necessarily going to be leaving anytime soon, in large part because it's going to come up next year. I mean, there's no question that other legislation is going to be proposed. So there's no question in my mind that it's going to come up again. I don't know that anyone, and part of it too is it doesn't happen, doesn't go into effect until at least January, and then 4 months later, it may be changed for all we know. But there are churches that are considering that. And there were churches already considering that before, without knowing for sure which way it would go. So,
Yeah, just expanding on that, has there been any talk of the whole United Methodist Church in the U.S. distancing itself from the rest of the world?
okay, the question was, is there, in that same view, that line, is there any talk about whether the United Methodist Church in the U.S. would separate from the churches in the central conferences outside? Nothing serious that I'm aware of. I'm sure there's been some talk about that. We had the opposite issue in early years of the United Methodist Church, because the churches outside the U.S. there were people, and they were kind of dictated in some ways too by the U.S. churches. And now that's kind of in that process of shifting. So I don't know. Part of it is when we talk about that kind of change and other major kinds of changes like that, because of our Constitution, because of the way our Book of Discipline states certain things, we would have to have a whole bunch of constitutional amendments. And those come back to the local churches. Members would have to vote on those, then they'd be carried back into the larger church to see whether or not things would be passed. So it's not impossible to do those things. It's just a longer process. That would be at least a 2 or 3 year process to be able to do that. Because General Conference would take some action. It would have to be done and certified, if you will, by the annual conference. That may take a year or a 2 year process, and then the final goes back. Anyone else?
Where would the 2020 General Conference be held at?
I don't remember. Is anyone else? Minneapolis.
I'll share my ignorance. Why is Q added to the end of this acronym?
Anyone know better than I? Well, I believe it stands for question. Okay? People who are still not certain which group they would identify. And that's just where some people are. Okay, anyone else?
And one of our values is acceptance. And all of this just doesn't fit into me or acceptance of our values.
Her comment was, one of our values is acceptance. And we list them alphabetically because we didn't want to put them in a hierarchy. They're in a circle. But one of those is acceptance. And all this discussion makes it sound like we're not very accepting. It's legitimate. That as a larger structure, as a local congregation, as individuals, that's something we have to challenge ourselves about. Other question?
I like to say this is right. I'm perfectly happy that everything you do so that's my feeling.
It's spoken now.
Okay, thank you. Oh, he made a comment that he's okay with where things are. As I said, that's fine, but we're not here to promote or debate the merits of one view over another. Any other questions?
I read the editorial or whatever that
paper on one day, it's Wednesday, I guess it was, from the bishop. And the thing that popped into my mind is somebody reading that who doesn't know this body or doesn't know Methodist, the Methodist Church very well, is going to think we're a bunch of bigots. And we're going to have to be ready to not defend, but yeah, defend. I mean, that was the only thing that really bothered me. And his statement was rather cold.
I didn't have to read that one.
Well, I'll save it for you.
She was talking about the bishops, was it his editorial? That was in yesterday's paper, and I did not see it. I wasn't aware of it until this morning, but I'll read it later on. But she was making the comment that that made it sound like we're a bunch of bigots, and we all have to be ready to defend that. And I would simply say, we love people past that. You can't argue your way past that. You can't. It's like the question, have you stopped beating your wife? There's no answer to that. And have you stopped being a bigot? Well, there's no answer to that. The answer is who we are, how we live, how we approach others, and the care that we actually have for them. And if there's a group that decides that they want to protest the Methodist Church and they choose to protest outside of our church next Sunday, I would expect us to walk out, treat them kindly, invite them in if they want to, give them some water if they want, take them a chair if they need to sit down. Why should we treat them any differently? They have every right to do that, but at the same time we treat people with love and kindness and respect, whether we agree or disagree. Anything else? Yes, Brian?
I'm just going to add one thing that would be wrong of me not to. As somebody who works with our young people on a very, very regular basis, about 4 or 5 years ago, I stopped getting the question as to whether this was wrong or right. And the reason why I stopped getting that question is because to them, it's not an issue. It just is. And so I'm not asking you to change your opinion. Odds are I disagree with many of you. But do be aware that anybody under 35, this is not an issue, and we come across just as you described. And so we need to work extra hard to deal with that, whatever fashion that looks like. So I just want you to be aware that all of our young people here, they don't see this as an issue. And when they heard, there were a lot of crushed spirits.
Yeah, statistically, that's proven over and over and over again. Yeah, whether you think it's right or wrong, that's still what we deal with. Those are still the people we have to look out for as well.
This is not the only question that clergy are asked when they are going to try to be ordained. You might want to add some of those things that pastors or people who are trying to become pastors, things that they are asked, that it's not just about their sexual orientation, but there's...
Oh, yes. She turned it off completely. I didn't even hear that, but I'm going to. She was saying that sexual orientation is not the only question that's asked through the process of becoming ordained in the United Methodist Church. There's a ton of things that you get examined on. Everything from your theology, your work in the world, your perspective on a number of different things, finances, health, you name it. Virtually anything is fair game, if you will. And in many respects, I agree with that. Because as clergy, we should be held to the highest of standards. So people need to be examined. The debate has been now whether that's an issue that should be examined. And for those in the traditional view of things, it's not a matter of salvation. As we said, everybody is welcome to be part of the church. It's not a question of salvation. It would be a question of sanctification, of going on toward that perfection. And in that sense, from the ordination perspective, it would be Is this person still, and that's one of the questions we are asked. Are you going on toward perfection? That was one of Wesley's things. And the next question is, do you believe you'll attain it? If you say yes, you're in trouble. Because even Wesley said, I don't even pretend to think that I've attained that perfection in this life. But by the grace of God in Christ, I will one day receive that. And so we still have to continue working toward that. And from a kind of traditional perspective, it would be, okay, that's another area that has to be worked on. Anything else? Yes?
Based on what Brian said, how do we, as older members of the church, keep the younger people in this congregation?
The question is based on what Brian was saying about the younger people and their perspective being different. How do we, as older people, help younger people stay part of the church? It's a challenge. It is no matter what, because younger people see things differently. We all have as we've grown up. There was a time when my parents were absolute idiots. And then they became wise. But I think the challenge is it's one-on-one relationships. It's like everything else. The Christian faith really is about discipling one another. And we can't just rely on the church as an institution to do that. We have to demonstrate what that is. And even if there's a conflict about this particular issue, we love people anyway. And we admit that there's a conflict. And we admit whether or not we like it or we don't like it. And say, I wish it were different, but. And you don't try and hide anything. Particularly with young people, because you'll see through it anyway. And don't try to baffle them with your brilliance either. Just be honest. And let them know that you struggle too. I struggle with this issue. I'm a pastor. I love people. And I want the very best for people. I want what God wants for people. And that's why, for me, it hurts to see people hurt.
What would you say if somebody was a member of our church and was gay and came to you as the pastor and said, I've been called into ministry in the Methodist church?
The question is, what would I say to a person who's from this congregation, who's gay, but feels called to ordained ministry in this congregation? I would say, let's explore it to define it and see where that leads. If it really is a call to ordained ministry, then I have to let them know what the limitations are and whether or not they want to try to plow through that or find a different avenue. Because those are really the only options at the moment.
A different denomination, is that what you're saying?
Potentially a different denomination. Still be Wesleyan in the sense that we have very similar theologies. But as it is now, there wouldn't be a space for that to take place. And that's part of what part of the constitutionality questions regard is who has, at what level, at what place, does that take place where people are included or excluded on that issue. But yeah, it's a tough spot to be in. But it's a spot that I've been in before, and that's kind of what I've had to do. Let people know. You're welcome to continue on, but know that it's not set up for that. And that will be the best way to go about it. And honestly, there are some conferences and places that have chosen not to ask any of those questions. And part of the plan that's passed, a part of that is, and that will be challenged constitutionally, whether or not they have that option. Because the way it's changed was there is no option. Those things must be asked. And part of the question is, where do we ask that? At what level do we ask that? But at the local church, we're not asked to do that. You all are not asked to do that. You all are asked to affirm that you recognize a call in someone's life to ministry. And that ministry may be ordained ministry or maybe not. And at this level, you all don't define what that ministry is. You don't even, you affirm that you see that because you know them, you've experienced God working in their lives. So at the local church level, we don't necessarily have to make that choice. but we do have to let people know. It's only fair.
If a gay person came up to you and wanted to join your class to become a Christian and then be baptized, what would you say to that person?
The question is, if a gay person came up to me, asked to be part of the class and wanted to be baptized, to become a Christian, what would I do? Yes. Come on.
And you would baptize?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah. Because in the Methodist Church, our emphasis is on grace. And there's only one grace, that's God's grace. But we look at it in three parts. One is what we call prevenient grace, the grace of God that goes before and prepares the way. And there's justifying grace, the point at which we recognize what God has done for us in Christ, and we accept that so that we can be forgiven and given new life. And then there's sanctifying grace, which means we're going now where God continues to work in us, and continues to perfect us, and shape us and mold us into the image of Jesus. And so, yeah, they've already recognized the prevenient grace of God. They've come to the point of recognizing that justifying grace, and now they want to move into sanctifying grace. There's no reason not to.
It's more of a comment or an observation, but if there are going to be fewer representatives from the United States going forward, it would appear the outcome's going to be the same in 2020.
The comment is, if there are going to be fewer representatives from the United States, it seems as though the outcome in 2020, if it's dealt with then, would be the same. That would be statistically true. Whether that is actually true, I don't know. Because part of it has to do with not simply the number of U.S. delegates and Central Conference delegates. It's who are these delegates? What is their stance and their position on this? There could be, a major surge of people who are wanting, for instance, like the one church kind of plan from the United States that would offset what was there. We don't know because nobody's been elected. Any other questions? Yes, I'm sorry.
So why is marriage more important than baptism? Like, why do they let them get baptized but not marriage?
Baptism has to do with the personal grace that we receive. Marriage would have to do with understanding of what marriage is. Marriage being between two people who are heterosexual, male and female, because that was the design of God from the beginning. And they would say that there's nothing within Scripture they see that would change that definition. And it wouldn't necessarily be about a matter of grace. And let me say this as well, that though within the Methodist Church, we haven't, and now at this point will not, recognize same-gender unions as the church. We don't recognize that. We don't perform those. That doesn't mean we reject people who have, the people who may be part of our congregation. If they're in that committed relationship, then we look at them in the same way we would look at them otherwise. Does that make sense? Okay. We may not affirm that, but they still need the same kind of love that we show everybody. That is not the one determining factor. We maybe have differences, maybe we need discussions with each other, and maybe there will be some difference of opinion. I don't know. But that's kind of where we are. Anything else? And I'm certainly not the foremost authority on all this stuff. Okay? So I encourage you to continue to read things. Just understand that, as I said earlier, until we get the official language and all that kind of stuff formally presented for us, the General Conference speaks for us as the church. The rest of us are trying to understand, interpret that, and share our understanding of these things. So anything I said today is not necessarily an official statement. Okay? It's my best understanding to try to help in the process. So don't tell the bishop I was talking on behalf of the Methodist Church. Because even Bishop Carter doesn't do that. He sometimes speaks with greater authority because of his involvement in that and has a clearer understanding of what happened and all those kinds of things.
When does he retire?
He is in his second quadrennium with us. He started that, I don't remember if it was last year or the year before. So he has at least 2 years minimum with us, but potentially a little longer. Bishops, just like pastors, have a mandatory retirement age where you can no longer be full-time. So yes, continue to pray for Bishop, pray for the church, and all those who will be delegates, and continue to work on this process. And for those who are part of the Judicial Council and everything else. Final question?
Yeah, since Bishop Carter clarified his position on his retirement.
No. Not that I'm aware of. He asked the question, has Bishop Carter clarified his position on retirement? I'm not aware of that. The discipline has certain stipulations as to how long someone can serve to certain ages and so forth, and all of that. But I'm not up to speed on where he is with that. Well, let's pray. And we'll close. Our gracious God, thank you for our time together today. Sometimes difficult and confusing things to try to understand and grasp. But remind us that the most important thing is, as Jesus told us, love you with all of our heart, soul, mind, and strength, and love our neighbors as ourselves. Help us to do just that. Help us to continue to focus on the main thing, and help us find our way through the rest. May we be examples, living examples of your grace and love. And we ask you in the name of Jesus our Lord.